Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to see if I can move so I have a little more light.
Go for it.
Yeah,
While
well,
you do that, Valerie, I'm going to introduce everybody and we're going to get started. Welcome. I see that people are still signing on. So welcome, and we'll just get started and people will join us and pick up as we move forward. Really appreciate everyone tuning in this morning or afternoon, depending on where you are in the country, to Evolve Giving Group's Job Seeker webinar. We are really excited to talk about this topic, especially in light of the rather scary job numbers or unemployment numbers that came out this morning. I see we're on like a 6-week streak, breaking records in the wrong direction in unemployment in this country. And therefore the Evolve team, which by the way is a consulting firm for nonprofits, serving nonprofits in all shapes and sizes throughout North America, even beyond North America, with executive recruiting, campaign management, talent development, strategic planning services, board and leadership development. And so we're really interested in the topic of helping people to find their place in the nonprofit world. As part of what we do every single day is develop leadership in the nonprofit world. So we have asked some of the really impressive talent experts in this field to join us for this conversation to get a sense of what's going on. What are the opportunities for you, the job seeker, the people who really make this field tick, looking for opportunities to market yourself, to understand what employers are looking for on the hiring side. And once you've gotten in that door for the interview process, what should it look like from there? What are the best practices that we can all take with us as we navigate this job market? So we have experts who are going to talk about every step along this continuum, from getting yourself ready to be out there on the market, to being in there in the depths of the interview process, and even into onboarding into a new organization. Each of our panelists is going to speak for a couple of minutes about a different area or aspect of the interview and job seeking process. And then we're going to leave a lot of time for you at the end to ask questions. I'm going to do some very quick introductions of who you're going to hear from today in this order. And then I'm going to turn it over to our panelists. So first, we are going to hear from Carrie Darsky. Carrie, you can just wave. Vice President of Talent Acquisition at Hillel International. Carrie has spent her career developing talent, supervising staff, building community. In just 3 years, Carrie has really transformed the culture and the hiring strategy for Hillel's, creating a transparent, holistic, and communicative process. I have cut down all of these bios to just a few sentences, but I encourage you to go on our website and really check out the full breadth and depth of experience here. Prior to joining Hillel, Carrie worked at JCC's in New York, New Jersey, and Florida, and she also served in her favorite role as camp director. Jamie Perry from Evolve Giving Group is a consultant with our executive search team, comes to us with 10 years of nonprofit experience, bringing a wealth of knowledge in nonprofit management, fundraising, volunteer engagement, and board development to her role as consultant for executive search at Evolve Giving Group. Prior to Evolve, Jamie managed fundraising in the Midwest for BBYO and Friends of the Israel Defense Forces. Carmen, I'm always going to say your name wrong. I feel like Wethington or Weathington? She muted?
it's Wethington. Yes.
Thank you. Okay,
Yeah.
I couldn't let that go. Wethington, Vice President of Chief Human Resources Officer of JCFS Chicago, Carmen is responsible for providing strategic guidance and leadership for all aspects of human resources at JCFS. She comes with a wealth of experience in human resource management, including performance management, talent acquisition, training, and coaching in both nonprofit and corporate environments. Prior to joining JCFS, she served as Chief Human Resource Officer at Chicago Commons. Welcome, Carmen.
Thanks.
And Reverend Dr. Valerie Parker is Chief People Officer at the Greater Chicago Food Depository. Valerie's focus at Greater Chicago is building a culture of empowerment and racial equity advocacy. Prior to this role, Dr. Parker spent her career in human resources in the corporate sector. She has deep knowledge of the manufacturing, services, and distribution industries, as well as the nonprofit sector, and is an ordained clergywoman in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. That is a mouthful. Thank you, everybody, for being here. I really want to start by having us hear from Carrie, who again is going to sort of take us, we're going to take with each speaker, walk through the sort of phases of being involved in this search and again, being on the market. Carrie's going to talk about some of those beginning phases. There might be a little overlap here. And then I promise you again at the end, or even during, if I see questions in the Q&A box, which is where I'm asking you to put those questions, I may even interrupt one of our speakers and ask them to respond to it in the moment. We'll see how it goes. So Carrie, tell us what you're seeing right now in the field.
Hi, everybody. So good to be here. Thanks for having me. I wish I had better news to report, but I think the unemployment numbers speak to what we're talking about and what we're looking at. And I'm grateful that you're here today to help be your best self. And that's really what I want to talk about in this moment. What we're seeing from the Hill International perspective is a third of the positions are available that we anticipated this year. We are down 2/3 in the number of openings. I'm seeing probably 200% increase in applicants than we've seen. And we're seeing really talented applicants, which I know we're going to get to later, but I wanted to just share that it's a tough time to be looking for a job because there's fewer positions and there's more people looking. So we are feeling your reality. I'm coming at you with a lot of compassion for the moment that you're in. And I also want to say that that's a moment to, with a lot of privilege, I'm saying this and knowing that I'm saying it, take the best care of you right now. Just on a call with somebody right before this, who I know is joining the call today. And she said, I just want to know that I'm moving forward in my job stuff. And what we turn the conversation to is move forward in every area of your life right now is okay. It doesn't have to be in the job stuff. We always put our careers before everything else. I would imagine so many of us, especially in the nonprofit space, because we're so passionate about the work that we do and giving back to the community and who we are as people, that we are also the people that have allowed other things to suffer along the way. We are always the yes people. We take on way too much. We have a very hard time saying no. This is a moment for you to prioritize some other areas of your life to be your best self. What I want to see as a hiring manager is you at your best. And if you're sad and if you're depressed in this moment and you feel like the world is crumbling, which it may feel like for most of us, the world does feel like it's crumbling right now around us. We are in a pandemic. Let's recognize that. We're still in it. We don't see a light right now. It's far away, that light at the end of the tunnel. That's our reality. But how can you be your best self in this moment? The people that have stayed employed and stayed with organizations have either been really lucky or have demonstrated the ability to pivot and to be nimble, to be flexible in the work that they're willing to do, to be flexible and willing to take a different job. Some people were presented with an opportunity to be an administrative assistant from a program director. This is the moment to say, okay, the organization still needs me. I have something to give. I still want to have a roof over my head and food on the table. This is that moment to pivot yourself also. I will tell you as a hiring manager that I am deeply invested and interested in what people did during their pandemic year. What did you do during COVID-19 for yourself, for your community, for your family, for your world? This is one of those things that make you a better person. How you use this time to develop yourself will make you a better candidate for positions in the future. So my advice in this moment and what I would like to see is how you've developed yourself in this time. Small things. Are you taking better care of your physical health? Are you eating healthy? Are you getting out every day? Are you appreciating nature? I want you to talk about that. It's important. I will tell you, as at an organization where you're responsible for not just the hiring, but part of the team that thinks about everyone's best self and wellness, we look to each other to help through this. Nobody knew what to do. I can't rely on my strategic human resources officer to have all of the answers. She's never lived through a pandemic before. She's never run an organization through a pandemic. So we relied on each other and the resilience that each of us had. Well, I worked in New York City on 9/11. I had to deal with a bunch of kids that may have been coming home to no parents at the end of the day. We didn't know. So I took the skills that I learned there and applied them to this situation. This is not a crisis for today. This is a long-term situation we're in. How are we building strategy to get us into the future? Not just for today, but recognizing that people are in crisis in the moment. So let's go back to how you can be your best self. What are you going to do during this time to help you be your best self? That is a question only you can answer. We are happy to share what each of us is doing in that space. And I will tell you, for those that are employed, it's just as important for you to do that in this time too. We don't know what the end of this is going to look like. I feel grateful to be working every day. I don't know when that's going to end, if it's going to end. So I want to make sure my resume is up to date, that I am ready to network. So I'm going to switch to networking for just a second. And guys, keep me on to time because I told you I could really keep talking. The networking piece is really important, but it's not just networking with an ask of, can you connect me to this job? Can you connect me to this person? It's who's going to be the best reflection of you? Who is going to be the person that says to you, I don't really think that's the right job for you in this moment. I understand that you need it. I understand that you want to work, but that's not the right fit for you. Who's going to help you, not just connect you? And I want to really think about networking that way also. Connect with people that you haven't spoken to in a while just because they make you feel good about yourself, because they reminded you of a time when you were really happy and really engaged or doing something that you loved. They're going to help you be really positive in this moment. So find those people. It's a moment to try something different. Yes, you can be the greatest program director in the world. This might be a moment for you to say, I actually think the piece of the work that I love is the storytelling piece. Maybe fundraising is an avenue I should go into right now. Should I try that? And how can you do it on a volunteer basis to build that skill set before you can get those jobs? That's a moment. So connect to those people that can help shed some light on an area of the work that you've never done before. The only other piece that I think I was prepared to talk about, and I want to say right now, is the showing resilience piece in who you are and how we get there. Being your best self in this moment also means being somebody that you may not be, you've never had to be before, and that's a lot of work, but this is the time to put in that work. What does it mean for me to be more flexible? What does it mean for me to take something that humbles me a little bit in the job? One of the things that I've been saying to hiring managers from the other side, not the person doing the hiring, me, but talking to people doing the hiring, is this is not a moment where you have to take somebody or hire somebody in a position that's overqualified. You don't. Hire for the right position, the right placement, the right level right now. Just because that person's in crisis and they bring so much more than you need to the table does not mean that you need to deal with all that comes with it. And the same is true for people that are looking for jobs that are a little bit, maybe 1 or 2 steps beyond where they're at in this moment. This is not the time. You will be in competition with people that have that skill set, that have done that job. Look for a job at the right level for you at this moment. Today and this particular year is not the moment to take that leap, to take a job that you will be over your head in, because I will tell you, you're not going to get the supervisor support that you need to grow into the role, because supervisors are stretched way too thin and too tapped right now. You're not going to get the coaching and the mentoring that you need to be successful. And for those of you that are overqualified for the roles that you're applying for, you're not going to be satisfied. You're not going to be happy. It might be a salary, it might be a roof over your head and food on the table to keep you where you've been, but you're going to be bored. And what's going to end up happening is you're going to be resentful of the environment and resentful of the work. And that's not fair to anybody. And it's especially not fair to you. So look for jobs at your appropriate level right now. It's not a moment to stretch. It's not a moment to take something bigger than you are, more experience than you have. And I want you to be real about that. I'm going to pause because there's questions.
Carrie, a couple questions. you mentioned being overqualified. And so, I get this question all the time. Well, if I'm overqualified, why aren't I getting the interview? Aren't I a shoo-in for that job if I've done all those things? Like, why am I still not getting that call? And is that just a blow off from the employer? Like, you're overqualified. Is that a real thing? So answer that, and then I'll ask you one more.
So I want to say that it's not a blow off. The reality is if they have candidates that are at the right level, we want someone that's going to grow in the job. We want someone that's going to stay in the job. No hiring manager wants to hire again for this position in a year or 2 years or 3 years. We want someone to stay. So to hire you, who we see and recognize is overqualified for the position, means you're going to leave us. The minute the job market returns to normal or a better opportunity that a higher salary and more meets your skill set is going to show up, you're going to leave. So that's the risk that the employer may not be willing to take at this moment, that they're going to lose you. The other risk is they're not looking for someone that's going to tell them how to do the job. And that's something that they're thinking about. I don't want someone that's as qualified as me to be working for me in this position. I want someone that I'm going to learn from, that I'm going to help grow into the role, bring a different skill set. A lot of times job seekers don't think about the environment around them. They're thinking about the one job and the one position that they see in front of them. Maybe this is the moment. Start thinking about the other people that work on that team. Start thinking about the skill sets of the people around them. Do your homework, do your research. Who else works in that space? If you can bring something to the table that the rest of the team does not bring, you might actually have something that's really compelling for that group to say, wow, we don't have anybody with that skill set. It would be great to add them to our team. So I don't want you to think it's a brush off from the employer. It actually, I think most of the time is really calculated. And a lot of times people will give you the interview, but at the end of the day, and I'm going to talk about this later, I don't want anyone wasting your time. I want a transparent process. I don't want to call you and make you think that you're a candidate for this position when you're not a candidate for this position. So one of the practices that we pride ourselves on is not doing that. I'll call you and say, I saw your application. You look incredible. I would love to have somebody of your caliber and skill set. This is just not the right job for you. So I'm not dismissing you. I'm telling you that I would love to have you, but this isn't the right fit for the position.
What stands out for you on, I mean, if you mentioned getting hundreds more resumes than positions you have. So what is rising to the top? What stands out for you on a resume or in a cover letter or whatever, in an email? How is someone getting your attention when you have this number of resumes coming across your screen?
It's a great question. And I think it's changed a little bit in the last 6 months. So I want to just recognize that advice I may have given you in January, February looks very different now. I'm not looking at cover letters first. I'm just looking at resumes. I'm so inundated by the number of applicants that I have that I'm not looking at your cover letter before I look at your resume. If I see something in your resume, and I'll talk about that in a sec, if I see something in your resume, I will then go read your cover letter. And hopefully that and that, X plus Y are compelling enough to bring you to Z. So 2 things I want to say about the resume in particular. The ones that stand out the most are ones that follow process. So if we ask you to apply in a certain way and to have everything, like I'm saying to you, I'm not reading your cover letter first, but if you haven't attached a cover letter, you are probably not getting any consideration. If I see something in that resume because I've looked at you and I think there's something there, I might email you if I have the time and it's not a 200 applicant position. I might say, can you please submit a cover letter? I'd really like to give you full consideration. We don't always have time for that. And it is unfortunate. And I'm owning up to the fact that I don't like that we have to work that way, but we're a 3-person team for 300 positions. It's just not possible to look through everyone and give every single person. So resumes that are formatted differently, not the standard formatting. If there's a bright color on it, if there's your name is bold, but then there's something else with it. If you give yourself a, this is my skill set and this is what I want to learn. Somebody just submitted a resume with, this is what I'd like to learn. At this point, I was like, wow, this is somebody that's saying, I don't know everything. I'm coming into this knowing what I know and wanting to grow in the position. I was like, that is compelling. That is something that I want to hear more about. Resumes that talk about what you're doing during this time. Yes, I understand you lost your job. You don't have to tell me. I get it. I know why you're looking right now. You didn't voluntarily leave your position in the middle of a terrible, situation. We know that. You don't have to share your sob story about it. And I don't mean to minimize it. It is a sob story. I'm not trying to be insensitive, but I don't need to read about it. If I get you to an interview, I'll hear it from you because I'm going to ask you about it. But I'd rather hear about what you're doing since it happened. It happened and it stinks. But I pivoted and I changed my mind and I've actually been exercising every day and I've been volunteering to take kids in the neighborhood for walks because their parents are working, whatever it is. How have you used this time in a really productive fashion? So those are the things that are standing out for us, but for sure not reading cover letters before resumes has been a big pivot for us. We just don't have the bandwidth to do it. Did that answer them?
Thanks, Carrie. Yeah, and I have a lot more questions coming in about, we have a lot of overqualified candidates on this webinar. So I know I'm going to come back to you later with a couple more questions.
Great.
For now, I'm going to ask Jamie to talk to us. I mean, Jamie, you're a recruiter in the nonprofit sector. What is standing out to you, and how do people, I'm going to build on that, how do people stand out? What do they need to do with resumes and LinkedIn profiles to get that second look?
Sure. So thank you, Carrie. That was really great and really insightful. I'm going to talk about all of your personal marketing materials, which include resumes first and foremost, and a LinkedIn profile and cover letters. This is the time to get everything ready to go if you haven't already. So we're going to start with resumes, and a couple of these suggestions might seem slightly basic, but they should be taken as important reminders, because more often than not, a lot of these things are forgotten. So keep it clean and simple. Always use a sans serif font, and make sure you have plenty of white space, because as recruiters, we're reading so many resumes that if you are edge to edge covered in ink, it's going to be really hard to decipher what is what and might appear overwhelming. And I would say that the majority of recruiters might toss it to the side if they've received a lot of resumes for that position. It's important to have clear headings with bold or capital letters to separate out your resume. And next I want to talk about layout, because this is important, and everyone might have a different opinion on layout. But I think it's always the most important, of course, to start with your name and contact information at the top. And right below that, we're seeing a lot of summary statements, which we prefer over an objective. And these two are definitely not the same thing. A summary statement is going to explain the value that you can bring to the organization instead of what you are looking for. So this tells the reader who you are, what you've done, and what you can do. And we like to see you pull keywords from the job description that you align with your experience, and put those into the summary at the top. So you can label it as summary. You don't have to label it as summary. We know it's the summary. So that's definitely a trend that we're seeing. Underneath the summary, we like to see your skill set, because these are really important. So always make sure that you list the skills that you have that match the job description first, and then your additional skills can follow after that. Next is going to be your experience. So always start with the most recent, and have strong action verbs at each bullet point. So if you're repeating the same action verb every time, it doesn't look like you put a lot of effort into your resume. So I understand if your resume is lengthy and you've been in the field for 20 plus years, it might be hard to not repeat an action verb, but try not to repeat them with the same position if at all possible. Something that I want to mention is extremely important and often forgotten. You must quantify your achievements here with numbers, dollar amounts, or percentages. Like, for example, if you increased attendance at your annual gala by 22%, we definitely want to see that. If you increased your annual campaign by $35,000, we want to see that. So don't list out your job responsibilities here. We know what you do. Tell us why you're great at doing what you did. So in these times, it's important to remember that this market isn't necessarily a market for growth. It's more of a market for saving. So think of examples that you can put on your resume to show the organization how you've saved a former organization money. So maybe you had the opportunity to review a budget and you were cutting unnecessary spending and saved $100,000 for the organization that year. Or you were tasked with the annual gala and you were negotiating with your vendors and got a better deal than the year before. That's important, especially during these times when we are in save mode and not necessarily in growth mode. Under your experience is going to be your volunteer work. So show your involvement in the community and what transferable skills from volunteering you might have that you didn't pick up at work that can be helpful in your position. And last is going to be your education. If you've been in the workforce for 30 years, your education should not be at the top of your resume. And that's really important to know and shocking at how often we see it. So education always at the bottom unless you're a fairly recent graduate. Something to note, especially in times like this that Carrie mentioned, we don't need the whole story on your resume, but if there is a gap in your resume, whether it is COVID or something else, explain it in a short way. If you took off 10 years to raise your children, that is admirable and amazing. And we need to know that that's why you weren't working for 10 years. You were doing something extremely important, or maybe you were taking care of a sick parent. So let us know if there is a gap so that we don't have to ask. Next, we're going to talk about your LinkedIn profile. Your online presence is absolutely your most valuable asset, but more so now in these times. So we always look at LinkedIn and even Facebook before reaching out to a candidate. So this is your best chance to make a great first impression. First and foremost is going to be your photo on LinkedIn. If you don't have a professional headshot, that's totally fine. Just make sure you have a clear, focused, and professional looking photo. If you don't have a photo on LinkedIn, I'm probably not going to reach out to you. And I would say that that's probably the same for most recruiters. So definitely have something on there. I always tell candidates and my friends that if you wouldn't be comfortable with this picture on a billboard, it should probably not be on your social media, and that also includes Facebook. Underneath your picture is going to be the tagline, and this should summarize the work that you do or the work that you are looking to do and not your current job title and organization. So for example, on my profile, it says executive recruiter serving the nonprofit sector. It does not say consultant, search, evolved giving group. So under that is going to be the about section. So in this section, you'll outline your years of experience, your areas of expertise, skills you have, major accomplishments, and pro tip, and to save you some time, this could be exactly the same as the summary statement on your resume. So again, don't list everything out that you've done and accomplished. That's what a resume is for, but definitely have the key highlights there. So another thing about LinkedIn, always remember to get recommendations from former colleagues on LinkedIn. It always makes you stand out, and the more groups that you're a part of, the better. Last is the cover letter, and your cover letter is a story. It should be short, sweet, and to the point, especially now, as Carrie mentioned. Cover letters are not being read first, but if we see something that we're excited about on your resume, we will absolutely go to your cover letter. And as a recruiter, I won't send any candidates to the organization for an interview without a cover letter. So this is an opportunity to show some of your personality. Your cover letter should be no more than 3 paragraphs and 1 page or less. So I'm going to go through my 5 cover letter tips, and we will move on from there. The first is do not use a boilerplate cover letter. It's okay to have a basic cover letter template, but make sure that each one that you send is tailored to the specific job and the organization. Second would be find a direct contact at the organization if at all possible. So if a simple Google or LinkedIn search doesn't give you the answer you're looking for, it is okay to call the organization and find out who is hiring for this position, but use that as a last resort. It should not be addressed to dear hiring manager or to whom it may concern. If at all, you can avoid that. My third tip is that when you're writing the body of your cover letter, I always suggest listing out all of your workplace accomplishments and then pulling out those pieces that best relate to the job description. It shows that you've read the job description, and those key buzzwords are really helpful when a recruiter is doing a search. My fourth tip is to have a call to action in your cover letter. So you want it to be crystal clear what you want them to do next and what you're going to do next. So provide a timeline for when you are going to follow up, and also give them an opportunity to follow up with you. For example, ending with, I look forward to hearing from you. So always have a call to action. And my fifth and final tip is to edit your letter. A very small typo can break you, unfortunately, with this search, because recruiters look at hundreds of cover letters, and a typo is a reason to toss yours to the side, because this should be one of the most important pieces of material you're putting forward. And if you have a mistake in that, it just shows that maybe in the future you might not be the best candidate because you're not paying enough attention to detail. So read it out loud to yourself multiple times. It's the best way to find mistakes, or maybe ask a friend or family member to proof it and give you general feedback. So I think that that is always helpful. That is what I've got to say about your marketing materials. Happy to answer any questions if any have come through, or if Carmen is ready to chat.
We definitely have some LinkedIn questions. So I promise I'm going to come back to, we have some resume and LinkedIn questions in the chat and in the Q&A. I'm going to come back to them during the Q&A section. I want to turn this over to Carmen now to take us to the, we've gotten in the door, Carmen. And
you've done a ton of work.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
so,
then what? What happens?
So
What's the world of interviewing look like?
Yeah. So if you think about all the work you've done, you've put into the process, this is your time to shine. And this is your time to make sure, and I always think about this, that the goal of the interview is to connect with the organization or the interviewer and to give them no reason to say no. And so everything has shifted from in person to now to video, which means that we don't, as I've experienced the video interviewing, people do them in various places. I've had interviews where someone sat on the floor in her living room and the computer was at a table. I've had people do it in their bedroom. You really, really, really want to think about, what are people seeing behind you? What are you presenting? A good way to look as a benchmark at that is to look at when you see people doing video interviewing on the news or in other webinars, typically they either have a blank wall or there's books and a staged area, because you really want to make sure that it looks professional and that you take the time to present your best foot forward, as Carrie was saying. You got to really get your energy up for this event, and you really got to be prepared in regards to what you're trying to connect to that individual with and how that organization operates and what that organization is doing, so that as you are in that interview, one, your energy has to be up, because you can still communicate energy across the video environment. And you got to make sure that you're dressing appropriately, even though right now I might have on shorts. You don't know that because I have on the right color. I typically wear a button-down shirt, and I put earrings and makeup on, all the things you would do if you were going in that office space to connect with an individual. And that interview is very important. Typically, I also think about what kind of questions am I going to ask that interviewer once they go through their process that's going to separate me from those people who are coming who may be more qualified or as equally qualified, because I'm trying to stand out. And typically my questions are all around whether my particular application and skills that I bring to the organization are a fit for the culture that they have. And all of my questions are around culture, because I want to know, tell me a little bit about the culture of the organization. What does it look like to be successful there? And those kind of questions really do impress interviewers to think about, wow, maybe this person has thought about not just their skills, but they're looking for a place where they can be successful, happy, energetic, and thrive. And so I really, as I was thinking about this morning, as I was getting dressed, I thought, what am I wearing? What do my environment looks like behind me? How do I find out as much as I can about this organization? Because after you've done all that work on your resume, you've gotten that resume into a space where Carrie's looking at it and she's decided, oh, this is someone I'm interested in. You want to perform in a way and present in a way that reflect all the work you've done, but also connects with that interviewer in a way that makes you stand out outside of all the other candidates. And so all of that requires some detailed thinking and some strategizing, and to really look at your energy on that morning. I mean, typically what I do is before I interview, and this is just a trick of mine, I watch something funny that will make my energy kind of propel across the screen, or do a little exercise to get that energy up so that as I'm talking to them, I present the best information. Be prepared to talk about the tough things too. You're right, COVID has been tough on all of us. I started my job on January 29th. Right before it hit, it changed everything that I knew that I had skills in that area of HR and leadership in HR. And so I'm starting to observe how that's changing. Everything's done over video. Everything's done in a non-connecting way because we can't be in the same spaces with each other. And so once you have gotten that video interview and stood out and really impressed the recruiter, and then you're now going through the process, let's talk about onboarding, because once you get that offer, onboarding is very different than it was 6 months ago. Everything is done remote. So we all know that success in most organizations are all based on relationship. So I spent a lot of time, and I do recommend this to people who talk to me about onboarding, is that, yeah, you're going to go through the normal processes about training and things of that sort. But now, how do I connect with my team? How do I build relationship across the team that I've now joined, where I cannot go out for lunch with them or be in the same space with them. And so all of that is going to require some really forward thinking and working with the supervisors, because we're doing that on our side. Now, how are we going to do onboarding in a way that you connect with this applicant and that you connect with this new hire and also integrate them into the culture of the organization? And that's going to require greater effort, greater moving forward as you as an individual, as well as the team that you're working with. And so there's some things that we've put in place. Managers are having morning huddles with their teams so that we know what the day is going to look like. And if there's support needed across that team with the new hire, they now have the opportunity to get that across that team. There's check-ins that happen throughout the day for 15 minutes so that the team can say, okay, here's the work that needs to be done. Have we been able to accomplish that? Or do we now need to pivot because something else has come up and we now need to deal with those issues? So there's a lot of different things you need to think about as an applicant. Yeah, getting the job is really the most important, and presenting yourself is the most important, and making sure your tools that you use to do that. But now, is it a fit? Now, how do I connect across the organization to build relationships?
Carmen, I have a question about, being prepared to ask your own questions in the interview. That maybe I'm good with all the questions that might be asked of me, but when an interviewer says to you, "Do you have any questions for me?" should the answer always be yes? And how do you determine what those might be?
I think interviewers are impressed that you have thought things out if you have questions. If you have no questions, they're like, oh, well, I would have a question, yes. So I would choose something. And I think that what has been, in my experience, what makes or breaks a fit is about the culture. Tell me a little bit about the culture of the organization. I often say, give me 5 adjectives that describe the culture. And how is that demonstrated in what people do every day? Like for instance, an organization may say, we're a customer-focused organization. Okay, how is that demonstrated across the organization? I often ask, what's most important, budget or mission? And how does that play out? I ask, okay, so I think about the questions that are most important to me as I'm trying to be a fit for this role and this role and how this role fits me. So think about that. And it doesn't have to be the traditional questions. I may ask the recruiter, can you tell me what's most important in the organization, creativity or innovation? Because it tells me a little bit about what's important to that organization. What's most important, wellness or productivity? Now, there's no right or wrong answer to those questions, but they give you an insight into that organization. So you should have at least 1 or 2 questions that are not related to, like salary or benefits, but that are related to your thinking through how you fit into this organization and why you are the best fit based on how you're thinking or perceiving this particular situation in the interview process.
Thank you. I know we're going to come back to you with some other questions because there's a lot of them. I'm gonna let Valerie take the floor here, and I'll tell you, Valerie, we already have a question about whether or not salaries for open positions are being lowered now. It seems that way to me, says the questioner. How can I negotiate an offer to get a higher amount of bonus or the salary revisited when the organization is in better shape, which may be outside of an annual review timeframe? So can you talk about we're now into the interview process. If you're lucky enough to be made that offer, are we in a position to negotiate? How does that typically go?
Yeah, I mean, you are always in a position to negotiate. And so I think your question is, I think I have actually a question about the question, which is, the question was, it appears as if the salaries are being lowered. So I think that goes to kind of one of the talking points that I have about negotiating salaries. Where are you getting your information from, right? How do you know that? How do you know salaries are being reduced? How do you know what the salary range is? And so I think that's probably the first question, because if it's anecdotal information, I love what Carmen said about, you've done all of this work. So whether you're coming from the external or your internal, you've done all this work either to get the role, or you've done all this work to show up as a really productive, high valued employee. And that can shift with how you approach negotiating salary, right? It can shift. So maybe if I share what I share, hopefully this will help. And if not, I'm happy to dig a little deeper with that question. I just want to talk about quickly three points about negotiating the salary, whether you're internal or external. There's some nuances with those who are internal, but size and scope matter. So there is not a one size fits all nonprofit. The Greater Chicago Food Depository is on the larger end of nonprofits. We employ 200 people. We have a very large budget because we provide food through an anti-hunger campaign and policy work for 800,000 families within Cook County. So that's a little bit different from a nonprofit that may do something smaller in their scope and have, 30 employees. So it's really important to know the scope. Read the 990s. And in doing so, when you see that the CEO makes this at a very large nonprofit and the CEO makes this at a smaller nonprofit, kind of unpack that and try to ask why, so that you're not coming into the smaller nonprofit having looked at the larger nonprofit's budget and asking for what they do, right? Because at the end of the day, their ability to compensate is driven by what they budgeted for in that previous fiscal year. So what is the revenue? Look for that. What is the reach of that organization, the scope? What is the mission? Is it a domestic organization? Is it international? Even though you may come into the organization in a similarly situated role, one of the things that can kind of unnerve, if we're being transparent in our language here, one of the things that can unnerve a hiring manager is if you're comparing yourselves to a role in a corporate environment. And so when you come into the building and you come into the conversation and you say, well, I was making this over here as a director of X. And you're like, but you must not have read the 990s. You must not realize that we're a nonprofit. And so that's the first place, really kind of understand the size and scope of the organization. The second point I'd make is this whole notion of law of supply and demand. There are roles that will always be in demand. Finance will always be in demand, right? In most organizations, marketing will be in demand. But there have been some role shifts in the marketplace relative to COVID-19. So prior to COVID-19, at the Food Depository, we were really struggling to find folks to be in our fund development department. We just could not find them. Now that we're in COVID, many nonprofits, some have shuttered their doors, which is unfortunate, but some their fundraising capacity is not as strong, or the donors are deciding to do different things with their money. So now we're in a place where we can find all sorts of candidates for fund development, right? So understand that there is a law of supply and demand in the marketplace for a job. So just because you're in a role doesn't mean it's always in demand. And I think it goes to probably what Carrie said early on, when you think about your role and think about the skill set and think about the transferable skill sets that you bring. And I think the final point that I want to make is the negotiating the salary. I go back to, what is the source of your compensation information? And just to add a little bit of levity here, my friend is not your source, right? My friend said, and you don't know how many times we've heard that, or so-and-so in another department said. And so then when we ask you, where do you get this information from? Sometimes people get kind of put off that we say, where do you get this information? So is it a reputable source? Do your research, look at publications, get a hold of reputable survey tools, so that you can understand what the marketplace is paying for, organization similar in size to the one that you're interviewing for, the role which is similar to what you're interviewing for. I'd also, for both internal and external candidates, I would talk about asking about what the merit review process is. When you understand that, then if you're coming in the door if we say, well, we do our annual review at this time, our annual merit review at this time, let's say it's September, and you're interviewing in July, what you might want to do in that negotiations is talk a little bit about, well, when will I be eligible? And it's okay. When would I be eligible for a merit increase? Some organizations, if you come in at a certain cutoff, you may have to wait 18 months before you get an increase because it's based on a cycle. it's important to know that so that you can say, well, because the cycle, it would put me at a disadvantage, 18 months out. I'm wondering if we could do a little more in terms of the initial offer. And that's fair. That's a fair ask. And if you're interviewing with an organization that considers that a fair ask, they will consider that in your negotiating conversation. I would also say examine, especially nonprofits, examine total compensation. Sometimes a nonprofit does really, really well with benefits. For example, we implemented a parental paid leave policy last year, so that parent, whether you're male or female, whether you're married, unmarried, no matter what your relationship with your partner is, it is paid at 6 weeks, up to 6 weeks, for you to be off with your partner, so that you can care for your newborn or your adopted child. And so that's really important to some people. Also understanding that many nonprofits don't necessarily have a 403B match. So you need to ask those questions so that you can get an understanding of what your total compensation would be. A couple more points quickly. Once their offer is made, there's something in negotiation theory called the BATNA, best alternative to the negotiated agreement. So when you sit there with yourself and the hiring manager or HR, what is that best alternative? Is it for you to walk away? Is it for you to kind of continue to negotiate further? Because the organization has a BATNA as well. So if you go in and you come in strong and you're asking for, and I'm not kidding, somebody tried to negotiate just $1,000 more. That's really not negotiating. That's putting on the pretense of negotiating. So when you come in and I make you an offer of X, if you have done all your research and you're able to make the case for why you want Y, we're listening. We really are listening. We understand that people want to negotiate. So I would want to also dispel the myth that you can't negotiate. Everything is negotiable. It's just how you approach it. And it's not uncommon and it's not an unfair ask. What is the range? Sometimes it's published, sometimes it's not. So if you find that what you're being offered is in the 25th percentile versus the 50th percentile, it's okay to say, what's your compensation philosophy? So that they can say, well, because of our budget in the COVID-19 era, we may only be able to offer in the 30th percentile. Then you can say, okay, that's fair. To the question asked earlier, how do I move up to the 50th percentile? And they should be able to say, look, we're going to re-examine that after COVID, after we can make sure that the organization is stable. We also have the merit review process. We also build in equity. So we will address equity at that time as well. So those are some of the things, and because I know I don't want to run out of time for questions. And also finally, in your negotiating, argue that your skill set addresses a future need as well. Sometimes we get caught in, I can do the job now, I can do this job, but understanding that the organization is forward-looking. And so if they are in an IT transformation, for example, ask them about, tell me a little bit about your IT transformation, because these are the skills I bring to help support that work. Yes, you're right, we do need that. And so it's not about what I did in the rearview mirror, it's about you're going someplace, I can take you there, I have that skill set. And so that becomes another component of your argument when you try to negotiate a higher salary. I'll stop right there. I know there's questions and I know there's short time.
Yeah, we have a question about at what point in the process is it okay to start talking about salary and benefits? Do you have to wait until you have the job offer? Can you, if you're in a position of not really wanting to waste everybody's time and you really just want to get a sense of it, can you ask about it up front? And how does that not sound assuming or presumptive on the part of the candidate?
I can't speak for my colleagues here on the call, but I'm expecting that you would ask it because I don't want you wasting my time either, right? So if we've gone through the screening interview and we find out, yes, there's an interest on both sides, I would expect in that first formal interview that it's asked if it's not offered, right? And I would just simply say, what's the range of this position? And the organization should tell you. If they don't want to tell you, then that's telling as well.
That's true. For sure. I mean, I respect that because it really does respect our time. And it's okay to, I ask the same, I recommend people ask the same way. Please share the range or where you're thinking this position is going to fall. And sometimes people will say, well, what's your current compensation? And you can, well, they can't ask that now. But it's they shouldn't be anyway. But you can always ask, what's the range? And how do you determine where people fit on your range?
Yeah, and I would add to what Carmen said that it's important to have that conversation ahead of time, because what sometimes happens is it's not asked, there's a little bit of give and take, and then once you get in the door and you're able to believe that you have identified where people are compensated, or now you get your budget and you have direct reports and you kind of see where they fall, a month later, now you want to negotiate, and then that starts to kind of put stress and strain on the work relationship. So it is good to have that conversation in advance and ask all of these other tangential questions about compensation. One thing I would add is be very careful of how you ask things. I talked about well, can I get $1,000 more? Well, sure you can. I was hoping you'd ask for more so we can actually negotiate, but okay. But when you ask for vacation, and maybe nobody's thought about this, it sends a signal when we all want to figure out how to piece together an offer. But when you ask for, can I get 6 weeks of vacation, when the norm in the organization, it's tiered, you get 2 weeks the first year, 3 weeks, whatever it may be. Well, because where I've come from, I had 6 weeks. Okay, but that's where you came from, right? And so if you push too hard on that, what it says to the employer is you're more interested in being on vacation than you are working in this organization. So there's a delicate balance when you negotiate.
Agreed.
Totally agree. I mean, you want to present that you're present and available for the company, but you're also trying to figure out how you can get, because time off may be the most important to you. I get it. Mm-hmm. But, most organizations do have what they consider to be marketable benefits in their minds. And so you never get where you come from the same thing always when you're going somewhere else.
Carrie, we have a question about breaking into a job market in a different city. If you're looking to relocate or willing to relocate, how do you navigate that? Is it better to move first if you're looking to relocate and then look? Do you want to be looking first? Are employers likely to cover moving expenses? How does that typically work?
Typically, or in COVID times? So it's a fabulous question. I think for at least in the space that we're in right now with people working remotely, I don't think it makes as much of a difference whether you're physically in the city or willing to relocate to the city. The only challenge is if that city goes back to work before your city that you're currently in goes back to work, will that affect how many weeks of quarantine you have, things like that. So I think it's a conversation to be had. What you could do, and I've seen this done a few times, is not put your current city on your resume. Just put your email address. You don't have to put your full address. People are trying not to do that anyway. I'll let Jamie weigh in on whether that's okay or not when it comes to the resume. But you don't have to put a city. The reality is I have so many candidates that have moved to other places in this moment because they didn't want to stay in their city apartment because there was nothing for them there, or they moved in with their parents to save some money for a few months, or they went to a country house if they're fortunate enough to have one and that's where they're working from or not working from, or they're staying with family to support those that needed help somewhere else. So I think it's totally okay at this moment, whether you physically relocate to the city or you are planning to. What I've also said to our hiring managers we don't know how long we're going to be in this. If somebody has an interest down the line of moving to a place, great. But if they're willing to work from wherever they are right now and you need the job to get done, hire them wherever they are. We could all be sitting next door to each other and it wouldn't make a difference. And we're in like 5 states, I'm sure. So I don't, this time, and I'm going to actually address one of the questions that came in also. We just don't know. There is so much unknown in this moment. Valerie, Carmen, and I would imagine, and for Jamie and Amy also, like I've had more imposter syndrome in my work these 6 months because we've never faced this before. I think I knew what my job was back and forth before March. I could tell you ins and outs of how it was going to be, what the process was, what it looked like, and everything's up in the air right now. I would also say that to you from the job seeker side. organizations are not at their best right now. We want you to be at your best. I know I said that, and it sounds like I'm talking about both sides of my mouth, but we're as an organization are not at my best. We've reduced our staff also. We had a 30% reduction in staff, which means we're doing the same amount of work with 30% less people. So I saw the lack of response, or somebody didn't follow up, or I feel like I've been ghosted. Yes, it sucks, and I'm sorry, and we want to be our best. All of us are working hard, especially in the HR side of things, to be the best, to represent the organization its best, to get the organization to be its best. I don't think we can look at the last 6 months for any organization of anyone being at their best.
Also, there's this aspect of COVID that has created this sense of there's a mental health component to it, that everyone's still trying to remain in a normal, work space, but there's all this mental fear that goes along with this particular condition. And so it's impacting, as Carrie said, the best operation in your organization. So I find that I spend a lot of time with my team asking them, how are you doing, before we get to the work? Because, we're all struggling with this on some level, whether we're doing it or someone we care about are doing it. So that's why I thought it was very powerful when Carrie said, take care of yourself. Despite the fact that you are in a job search, despite the fact that, you may be working someplace and get a call from a consultant about something else, but still take care of yourself, because that's what's going to help you really be able to present well. And if you are doing things out of fear or not out of your strengths, that is going to go forth. So it really is going to take some time to do some reflection. And that's been the mode that I've been in. Like, how is this impacting me? What is it doing to me? How is it making me not be my focus on my strength and move forward on that? Because that self-awareness and that self-knowledge will help you in all the arenas that the panel has been talking about.
Carmen, we have a couple of two questions about this, we're not taking phone calls thing that you see on these job postings, so no calls, please. But you've submitted your resume. You actually think you're a really strong candidate for this position. Do you call? Do you never call? What if you're not hearing back? What do you do? What's appropriate?
So I've seen I call, but you really gotta balance it between calling and inquiring, and sort of, as one recruiter said, stalking me. So it's a balance between the two. I think a call is fine. Just know that people are not in the office. So those calls are being sent someplace, probably in an email someplace, and it may take them a chance, a little bit to get back to you. However, your name has been said. That's what I've always thought about calls, is that, this is Carmen Wethington. I'm following up on my resume. I really am interested in this organization. And then you got to just sort of let it marinate. So calling is okay. I don't have a problem with calling, and I've recommended people. I do find that I'm getting more things in the mail, though, again, where people are now really actually sending documents through the U.S. mail versus putting them in an applicant tracking system. And I'm getting thank you notes more now in the mail versus email. That may help you stand out because someone has to actually touch it. So those are some things that, we're going back and forth between old and new strategies, because there is no road paved. We are paving the road, driving the car, and repairing the road all at the same time in this COVID environment.
Jamie, a couple questions about resumes and LinkedIn profiles. How important is it to have a social media presence? One of our participants said, I noticed you said that. I really stay off of social media for privacy purposes. Does that mean I'm not going to get the interview? And then we had a couple of questions about just how long our resumes should be. Comments on both of those?
Sure, I'll answer the first one. A social media presence isn't absolutely necessary if you are not using it for privacy or safety reasons. Obviously, that is the priority. I don't always use LinkedIn as a way to find people, but if someone sends me a resume and I don't know them already, I will look them up on LinkedIn to be in touch. or just to learn a bit more about them. Now, I did see a question in the chat box that said, how long should your LinkedIn page be? Do you need to have every single position on there? If you've been in the workforce for 30 years and you've had multiple jobs, I would say that's really a personal preference. That's up to you, but it helps me because maybe a job that you had 20 years ago or the organization you worked for 20 years ago might be a great fit with this new position that you're interested in, but your last 2 jobs were not. So the more, the better. I don't think that for every position you need to go into full detail, but you can say, you know, I was at the American Red Cross from 1997 to 2010. You don't have to give me all the detail, but as long as I know you were there, then it opens up the door for communication about that. The second question about resume length, I think if you've been in the workforce for 5 or 6 years and you've had, you know, 2 or 3 jobs, you're going to go to a second page. And if you've had 15, 20 plus years of experience, you might end up on a 3rd page, but I really wouldn't go beyond that. I think it's very common to see a 2-page resume. And for very senior people in the field, a 3rd is fine. You don't, just try not to be too repetitive if you're on 3 pages where you're listing the same types of experiences on each position.
Thank you. And
Sure.
you know what? We are out of time, but I want to say 2 things, 3 things really. A, thank you so much, Valerie, Jamie, Carrie, Carmen, for your expertise. This was so helpful. We really appreciate you volunteering to be a part of this panel. Second is that if we didn't get to your question today, my team at Evolve is going to be answering those via email, or you have an opportunity to set up a 30-minute complimentary coaching session with our team. If there's more that you're interested in talking about, if we can't answer your question via email, we're happy to schedule a phone call with you. So thank you. Please stay tuned. We'll be sending out more information and a copy of this recording in an email follow-up and an opportunity to get in touch with us in answers to your questions. So thank you, everybody. We really appreciate your participation, and we know there'll be more information coming out from Jamie's team from Evolve on how we can help you navigate the job market.
Great.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Have a
Appreciate your
great day.
time.
Bye-bye.